on? Goodness me, what a palaver. We're live. Don't know what happened there, guys, but we're back up and running now. Woo, that was stressful. Hi everybody, welcome along to our watercolour live. Same day every week, usually the same time, but clearly we're having problems today. Never mind. So, who's up for painting this little Tweety bird? We have our little cute sparrow. I've put a photo in the corner of the screen, so if you want to paint along, there's a little photo down there. Depends what device you're using, obviously, as to whether you can see it. Whoa, hello again. Hi, Martina, Karen, you'll paint later, Serena. Hello again. Hello. Hi, Paul. Chris, good to have you along. Chris, I will respond to your message, but I've been pretty tied up this morning. So, here we are. As I say, there's a little picture there if you want to paint along. I couldn't find the exact one, but it's very similar. And this is one I did previously. Okay, so I asked you to bring some different tools with you this week. So, strange tools. I asked you to get a pointy object. How bizarre is that? And what else did I ask you to bring? Some salt. So we're going to use a bit of salt, okay? So before I kick off with the bird, hi from RSA. Oh, hello. Hello, Ruth. Hello, Peter. Wonderful. Good crowd today. Okay, this is my third lesson this week. I'm exhausted, okay? So, let me talk to you first about the implement that I asked you to bring. So, I'm using a nib pen, but any sharp implement will do. And what the nib pen's we're going to use it for is to score into the watercolour paper. Now be careful with this. You don't want to score too deep. I'm just going to show you here a little demo. I'm going to score some feathers, something that looks like feathers. Tiny little scores there. I'm going to take some colour. Let's use the colours we're going to be using today. So a bit of burnt sienna. I'm going to paint over the scores. Okay, you don't want to mess up too much. Hello, Deborah from London. You don't want to move the paint too much. And can you see? I'm going to zoom the camera in a little bit more, guys, so you can see clearly what's happening on the paper. Let me just get my zoom button. In we go, a bit closer, a bit further out. There we go. Oh dear, I'm having fun today. Seriously. We don't need these technical issues, do we? So there you can see, hopefully, on your bit of paper, if you can't see on mine, I'll lift this up, okay, up to the camera. So you can see the watercolour goes into the indentations that you've created on the page and gives you little dark lines. Okay, you've literally made a groove in the paper. The pigment goes into that groove and it gives you those little lines. I also asked you to bring some salt, and let me show you. This is just table salt. Hopefully you can see in my little bird, around this area here in his belly, when the paint was on, I added some salt over the wet paint. And it leaves this mottled effect, so it gives you a nice soft look to your painting. Okay, so that's why I asked you to bring the tools. The last thing was a fine liner pen. This is a 0.2, and I just want to use the marker pen just to add a little bit of interest around the side of the painting when it's dry. Good afternoon, Roger from Coventry. Peter, who else we've got? CJ, are we back? Facebook Gremlins. I think the Gremlins come to get me today. Hey Pip. So let me move that to one side. I have my 300 GSM watercolour paper. Anna, first time watching in Wellingborough. Snap. I'm in Little Addington, Anna. So you're very close by. 300 GSM watercolour paper. It's taped to the board and I've pre-stretched it. That means I've taken some clean water over the surface, I've sprayed the back, I've taped it to the board and I've let it dry. And it dries really flat, stops it buckling. Hi Angela. So we need to sketch our bird. I'm using my propeller pencil, she says, unless this is going to go wrong on me today as well. And we're just going to sketch our little bird. As I say, he's on the screen down there in the corner. A very similar bird. Another newbie, Laura from Suffolk. Again, not that far away. Okay, so I'm going to start at his head. I'll just move this thing from my wrist because it's getting in the way. Ah, I'm so stressed, honestly. You don't need... Now notice when I'm sketching, I make little marks lightly on the paper. Now I'm using a B pencil, B lead. You should use a HB or an H really, because you want your pencil marks light. So bringing the scoop of his head down to his shoulder, and I'm going to come across. I'm redoing the one that I did earlier. Coming out for his tail feathers. I'm not going to draw too much into the tail feathers. I'm just going to place them where we want them. Hi Karen Cole from Hampshire. You see, just a little story for you. Some of you may have watched me on Monday at 10:30 in the morning when I was doing a live broadcast on behalf of the SAA, Society for All Artists. And I couldn't see the comments. So there I was, trying to do my tutorial. I love to answer questions when I can, whilst I'm live, and I couldn't see them. So I had gremlins again. Just going to make a little adjustment there. So bringing the bottom of his wing in, and each bird I draw will be slightly different. That's the joy of it. That's the joy of freehand sketching. They're never going to be exactly the same. I'm going to come down for his belly, under his legs, and a little bit of a slope. And let's come up the other side, into the beak. They've got funny beaks, sparrows. They're quite rounded. Quite rounded. Into the beak, into the bottom of the beak. Quite short, aren't they? Quite short little beaks. And then we can position the eye. And the eye, look at the beak, use that as your guide to where the eye is. It's fairly close to the beak, a little way back. I'm just going to pop his little eyeball in place. Does that look great? He looks like a duck. At the moment he's looking like a rubber duck. I'm blaming it on the stress and the gremlins. Coming round his belly. Down we come to his leg. He's a chubby little fellow, isn't he? I'm going to put some little marks in where I want the black sections or the grey sections to be, and where the brown pattern's coming in around his face. He's got a little white patch under the eye, so I'm also going to indicate where that is so I don't lose my way. Gremlins are eating the comments. Are they? Oh my word. So long as you don't put anything in that is a link or a www in the comments. There are some words I've had to block from Facebook purely because I get so many spammers trying to steal my viewers' money by putting spurious links in. So there's key words that I've had to block. So if you use one of those words, and I can't remember what they are because there's so many of them, then maybe that's why your comments disappeared. Possibly. Into his little tootsies. I wish I'd done him bigger now. Never mind. Off to the branch. Just give a little indication of the twig that he's standing on. Okay, so keep your drawing light, keep it sketchy, not too solid. Think about this front leg, this one, how it's attached, and that there's this little tuft of feathers near that front leg, not so on the back leg. Okay, there's our little bird. He's cute. Oh, thank you, Karen. Thank you so much. I enjoyed doing that one. Was a little bit nervous at the beginning, not because of what I was doing, because I've taught so many lessons over the years, but because I've never streamed on somebody else's Facebook, and I was really scared, because until you hit go live, you don't know what's really going to happen. So it was a bit stressful. But if I do another one for them, now I've done it once, then you know it's all good. So there we are. Our little sketch of our sparrow is done. I can chill out a bit now. Just have a bit of my tea. Just a reminder, I've put something on Facebook this morning. My on-demand lessons, if you're going to be bored, because apparently it's going to rain all over Easter, and you want to download one of my tutorials, I've got 20% off, which ends today, okay, at midnight. Use the code MUM20, okay, MUM20. Go to my website, it's on the screen, eunice.jfriend.com. Go to On Demand, and you can browse a whole library of lessons to keep you entertained over Easter. Okay, before I do any painting on my bird, I want to etch in with my pointy object a few feather-like marks. I'm going to add some in the chest. Some of these will stand out, others might get buried in paint, but let's put them on anyway. It's good in the lighter areas, just adding some little feather-like marks, tiny little indentations in your paper. I'm definitely going to add some on the back of his head. Scoring in gently, don't go too hard, don't rip your paper. And up his head. It's just a neat little trick, something else for you to try, and some longer ones on his wing. Really good, guys, for doing. You've got tea too. Oh, cheers, Sandra. Really good for doing distant trees in landscapes, just scratching in, and then when you put your green in, it gives like the bark of the trees, the trunks of the trees. Really nice little tool to use. Okay, that's done. We're going to start adding some colour. I'm using burnt sienna. A lot of the painting is going to be done in burnt sienna. So just add in a bit of water to my mixing well. I don't want the colour too dark to start with. Pick up some burnt sienna, pop it in the water. You can always test it on a scrap of paper how strong it is. I'm also going to use some of my golden umber. What am I talking about? Golden ochre. The gremlins have really stressed me. Laura, what paper do I like to use? I use 300 gram cold pressed watercolour paper with a fine texture. This one is by Archway. I do sell the paper on my website, so pop over there. But later this week, I will be getting my own branded paper coming into stock. So if you want to buy some, just wait a few days and buy it from me then. With my name on it. How exciting! Okay, so I've got some golden ochre or yellow ochre, and I'm going to be using some Friends Grey or you can use Payne's grey. In we go. Pop some of that in there. So they're all diluted at the moment. What brand of watercolours are you using? I'm using Eunice J Friend watercolour paints. They are handmade watercolours that I make myself, and if you're interested, you can buy those too from my website. What was that? You got them in 1994. Wow, Anna. Time for some new ones. Treat yourself. Okay, now if you haven't got grey, I hear you all crying, I haven't got grey. We're going to take ultramarine blue. I've nearly run out. Let me go and grab another one. Ultramarine blue. It's stuck. So ultramarine blue. Pop that in your well. And mix it with burnt sienna. There we go. And we've got a grey. Be careful how much brown you put in. Okay, if it's too brown, just add some blue and balance it out. Look, they almost match. There is another secret ingredient in my friend's grey, but I'm not going to divulge that. Okay, just in case you're going to make your own. Hey, and don't forget, for you newbies, if you're going on a shopping spree this Easter, get yourself one of my fish bowls. Okay, they're really fun to use for your brushes. Little resin 3D fish bowls. Let me show you one that's not got paint in it. Here we go. Little fishy swimming around in the bowl. And he's painted in 5 layers through layers of resin that I do. And it gives him a 3D look when you see him from the top. I've sold about 20 of those already. Okay. I'm going to take some clean water now. Let's get painting. And we're going to wet his underbelly. Clean water all over his belly, coming up to where the dark area starts. Clean water, not too much. You don't want puddles and puddles. This is going to give us something for the paint to play in. You love the palette and can't bear to part. No, you shouldn't part with it. The paints are fine, I'm sure. Okay, into my I'm going to start with a little bit of golden ochre. Just going to take a little bit. I'm not adding any more water other than what's in here, and just tapping in to our little sparrow's belly. Come under his wing. There we go. And now I'm going to bring in, wet into wet, some burnt sienna, a few touches of that. Watch what happens when the new colour hits the wet paper, the colour underneath, and they start. Do you send the fish bowls internationally? Message me afterwards, Maggie, and I'll look into a price for you. I had to stop my international shipping due to all the commotion over Brexit, but I'll look into it for you. And now I'm going to get some of my friend's grey and tap in round the other side. Just tap in, tap and move with the tip of your brush. Okay, just play around, drop in one colour in, and I'm going to bring some of that lovely grey over his bottom. Look how I'm just using the tip of my brush. I forgot to tell you about my brushes, didn't I? This is a size 12 watercolour brush. Again, everything I use I sell on my website. So this is a set of 7 brushes. I think it's £7, something like that. I use them all the time. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit more water around that grey to encourage it to spread out over the breast. And look how I'm leaving areas of the white paper showing through for the highlights. Where are we going to go next? Let's go to the top of his head. Now, the one thing you need to bear in mind if you're going to go and paint the wing next, the wing, when you put that colour on his wing, it's going to bleed because watercolour follows water. So if we paint next to it straight away, you're going to end up with a soggy mess, okay? So I'm going to leave that area for a minute. Oh, actually, I nearly forgot, salt. Whilst this is damp, I'm going to sprinkle some table salt into the paint. Here we go. Pop that table salt on and let it do its magic. You will see straight away when the salt lands that you get darker pigment around the salt, and what it's doing, it's absorbing the water in the paint, and it's going to leave this mottled look to your finished painting. Okay, up to the back of his head then, I'm going to take a bit more burnt sienna into my mix, make it slightly creamier, a bit more milky, and pop my glasses on, turn my board around a little bit, and I'm going to come in to this patch of darkness on the back of him. Wet on to dry. I've not pre-wet it. I'm not mixing colours here so much. Just going to take this. I've got enough colour on now, so I'm clean my brush out, and I'm just going to move that up to the edge of the bird with the tip of the brush. Over we go. Fabulous, real spot of colour. And now I'm going to go back into my grey, but around his face, look how dark, it's like he's wearing a banner. I'm a Stampin' Up demonstrator, and UPS delivery from Germany took 4 weeks, oh my god. Okay, so I'm taking Payne's Grey, nice and creamy this time, straight from the pan or straight from the tube. Be careful because we're coming around his little eye. So we want the paint creamy so it doesn't run away with us. You can switch to a smaller brush if you want. Coming around his mask. Come right up onto the tip of your brush. If you've got a good watercolour brush, it should come to a lovely point, coming under the beak here. And pulling down. Okay. Now I want some of this to bleed into the burnt sienna. I'm tapping around his mask where it joins the brown section at the back of his head. It really would be easy if I could turn this round. Coming across the top of his eye. Oh, here we go. Scary when you're doing small bits. And now I'm going to wet this a little bit more. Take it a bit creamy, but not neat, because I want the colour to start fading out as I come across, and pull some strokes into the burnt sienna underneath. So just pull some of your grey across. I've nearly lost that white patch, be careful Eunice. And then with a slightly lighter grey, I'm coming under the white. Keep it dry if you want to keep it white. And again, adding some water to my brush. I'm going to fan out and pull some of this grey down his chest. And there we go. Okay. By now, his belly under here should be starting to dry. So that's all good. I'm going to go into his wing. I'm going to go wet on to dry to start with. And I'm going to take my golden ochre or yellow ochre. I'm going to come into that wing. Now we scored this and I can see the score marks popping through where the paint's sinking in. I just want to give him a light undercolour, and also be careful with your little sparrows because there is a band of white just before we come to the tail feathers. So I'm going to leave a gap between these marks, leave a jagged line for where that flash of white's going to be on his tail. Back into my burnt sienna. I want to add some stronger colour now under his wing. So I'm taking more paint into my mixture, making it slightly stronger and creamier, more potent. I'm going to drop some of this burnt sienna to create a shadow under his little wing. Now whenever you add fresh paint over dry paint, remember we need to let that bleed in and not have a crispy edge. So I'm going to bring some clean water and creep up on the edge of that new paint that I've put down. So it's got somewhere to bleed gently into. Where shall we go next? I'm going to switch to my smaller brush for a second. Go back into my Payne's Grey or Friend's Grey. I'm going to come the other side of his beak. There's a little bit of that darkness, the other side. There we go. I'm waiting a lot today. I'm doing a lot of waiting for the paint to reach the right, shall we say, temperature. As in, it's not too wet, not too dry, before I make my next move. What I want to do is put some speckles coming out of this dark area around his face and come into his chest. And I want to do that with a dry brush technique. So I'm going to clean my brush, dry it off on my tissue, pick up some Payne's Grey, just a little bit, and I'm just going to be tapping and dabbing, creating patterns with this very dry brush back into the grey. And I'm literally using it like a stamp, okay? Just stamping down to create a mottled pattern. You don't need much paint. In we go. And it's going to create like tiny little feather marks, but you don't want it too wet underneath. So that's the waiting game that I was talking about. Just waiting for that right moment when the paper's still slightly damp, but enough to hold the mark. Okay. So we get these nice feathery little marks. Tiny bit of paint. Just tap down like you're using a stamp. There we go. And he looks all mottled. His bottom end is dried nicely. I'm going to do the same here. I'm going to add a bit more Payne's Grey. Remember, your watercolours always dry back lighter than when you initially put them on. So I'm just tapping in a few little marks over the salt. Don't worry about the salt. Just adding a bit more speckledy action to his rear end. Okay, where shall we go next? We'll carry on with his wing now. I can see the shine has started to go. The water's drying into the paper. So now's the right time for me to take some of my burnt sienna. Now I'm taking it creamy. It's not neat, but it's a nice, like, single cream consistency. It's not spilling around. If I tip my well, it doesn't move. It's nice and creamy. I'm going to come in with the tip of my brush and just create some patterns, some darker colours over the surface. Now, how I want this to be, you're welcome, Sue. That's what I'm here for. What I want to happen is that the paint underneath is still damp, so I'm painting wet onto damp, so that there is still a little bit of movement and a little bit of spreading out of your marks. Coming into his tail feathers, I'm just going to flick my brush away to get a nice feathery bottom. Place your brush on and flick away. There we go. So building up some feathers, feather-like action. If you look really closely at your work, you will still be getting the effect of the scoring that you did earlier. Now I'm going to come in again with some creamy Payne's Grey. Not neat, not watery, somewhere in between. I'm going to add some darker feathers over the top. Now we're kind of combining wet on wet and wet on damp. Just bringing some feather-like strokes, swinging backwards and forwards on the tip of my brush, and a few of these marks coming into his towel. I'm just skimming the paper, guys, really just skimming the surface. I'm going to add a little bit of this Payne's grey up here on his head as well. A few little marks on his head. I don't want to make him too dark. How's he looking? Is he looking okay? I'm going to go backwards and forwards between the colours until I get something that I'm happy with. Add in a little bit more burnt sienna. Now, if you want it a bit more blurry, whoops, you could take a water bottle, a little fine mister, and give it a spray. Shall I? Do you want me to? Shall I give it a spray? I'm not going to do it until someone answers. You're 10 seconds behind me, so... Shall I give my bird a spray is the question. We'll get the consensus of opinion. What do you think? Go for it. Okay, Martina. Thank you. So I'm holding the mister bottle a little way away. I'm just going to give it a spray. Now, that's going to reactivate the paint. It's going to start bleeding a little bit, but it will also do a magical thing. Okay? It will do a magical thing because the little tiny droplets of water that land kind of push the paint apart, and again it's another way of giving you a little mottled look. Isn't that fabulous? Just a fine mister bottle. Oh, Megan, no, it's fine. It's fine, don't worry. The bird's okay, he's going to survive. Oh, what fun. You know what I love? I look forward every Wednesday to doing these sessions. Okay, top of his head then, it's a bit bald, it's looking a bit bland, a bit boring. So I'm going to take some of my golden ochre, I'm going to drop it into the top of his head. Very diluted, okay, very light. And I've waited until the grey's dried so it doesn't bleed too much. I'm just going to spread that around, wet on to dry, over his head. There we go. A little bit of colour to our bird's head. And a tiny touch of grey, I think. Tiny touch of grey. Just coming out from his beak. Can you see? I just use the tip of my brush and I just tap in. Let it do its thing. There we are. Okay. I'm eking this out today. I don't want to go. I'm going to go back. No, I'm not. I'm going to do his tail feathers. Tail feather time. So, I want his feathers to kind of disappear. Okay? You've got to try it, Sue. It's good fun. I need to turn my board around for this. Bear with me while I move everything out of the way. Because I've got to get the angle right, you see. It's got to be right. I'm going to turn him upside down. Now you could, I never use my flat brushes in these tutorials, but today I've got my little flat brush out of my set. You can do it with your normal brush. I just want to experiment today. I'm going to go into my burnt sienna. It's creamy and it's thick. Okay, wash the brush. Just have it damp. You want creamy paint, not runny paint. And we are just going to dry brush over his towel. So that's why I say not too much water, and it needs to be just a damp brush and paint. And we are going to drag and lift. Lift as you go, and you should see the indentations and the pattern from the paper as it skips over the bumps. If you're using cold press paper, it will skip over the bumps. I'm going to go into my grey and do the same thing. I've had to move everything around, I'm stretching here. So, now this is like nice dry brush. We've got a little bit of moisture to the paper. I'm going to go again and really lightly skip over the surface so I get the pattern and the bumps from the paper underneath. I've made his towel a bit big. I got carried away, what can I say? Now I'm going to use the same flat brush. I'm going to go in and add a little bit more definition into his towel feathers up on the long edge. So I want to use this on its side and take in some grey and bring in some more solid marks through and over the top. I'll do the same with my burnt sienna. I am getting carried away today. I think I should be carried away. Just a few more marks there. And you get that lovely feathered look. But I've made his towel slightly too long. Will you forgive me? Okay guys, nearly there. Nearly there. So you can go back and forth over your bird, adding stronger colours where you need them. Let me bring everything back into place. I'm just having a look how the colour's drying and deciding if I want a pop more strength of colour under his wing, and I think I will. A little bit more Payne's Grey just along the edge of his wing there, just tap it in. Bit of shadow. Okay, eyeball time. Now if you want to and you're not confident, use your fine liner pen to do his eye. Okay, it is a tiny area and you do want to capture a little sparkle in the eye and leave a white circle around the edge. Okay, as I'm the teacher, I'm going to have to do it neat. Go into my, it's a really creamy paint, going into my grey. If you haven't got your grey, you need to do this. You need to go brown, blue, on your pans or in the corner of your tube paint, brown, blue, burnt sienna, ending on the blue, and you'll get a really dark version of the grey. My hair's getting in the way. I'm just tapping in on the tip of the brush. You know what, I prefer using my big brush, it's weird. This one's got a little loose hair on it. Tapping in, I'm going to go to my big brush. Into my grey. Trying to leave a glint in the eye. Take your time. I've gone all quiet now, look. All the giggling stopped. Managed it. So there's a little glint in his eye. And now I'm going to use my brush around the outside of his eye to bring that rim, the white circle, a bit tighter. And you're better off bringing the outside in rather than trying to work in that confined space. Whilst I've got this on my brush, I might as well pop his little legs in. A little bit more water now. Down his legs. Very simplified image of our bird. A couple of little claws. There he is. Into the beak next. He's a cute little fellow, isn't he? He might end up on a mug. He might. If you look back on my Watercolour Wednesdays, a few months ago I did the pheasant. Perhaps you want to give a go to the pheasant as well. Okay. Yellow beak. To start with, I'm using my lemon yellow, nice and creamy, straight from the pan into the beak. Now, you absolutely have to make sure everything around the beak is dry first. In we go. And then I'm going to add a little bit of vermilion, this bright red. Just a little tiny bit. Over the yellow, wet onto wet. And a bit under his beak, just to give it that little orangey hue, which just leaves us with the branch. So for the branch, I'm going to go wet onto dry first with my burnt sienna. with a little bit of ochre in it. A little bit of ochre. Kind of mid consistency, milky, not creamy. I should wait for his feet to dry really. Coming around his toes, because they're still wet. And I want to come along the edge of the twig. Okay, and the bottom edge. Leaving a gap in the middle. And of course, a twig isn't just, we want some little bits coming off, some little areas of broken twigs and knobbly bits. So just coming in from that edge to create some interest. And now I'm going to take clean water along the middle. Clean water down the middle, touching in both sides of the paint so it bleeds into the wood. And it's giving us a highlight in the middle. I'm going to do the same now. I'm going to take Payne's Grey and I'm taking it medium milky consistency along that edge again, over the sienna, wet onto wet. I want a nice crisp edge to my twig, my branch, and the sienna colour will show through as well. And just bring it together at each end. And just let that paint do its thing. Just let it mooch around. You could also take your little stick and scratch and pull out some paint that way. I think our time together is nearly done. I want that grey a little bit stronger. Here we go. A bit stronger on that edge. So say I want a lovely wet on dry crisp edge to my branch. When he's dry. Okay. Now of course you could splatter him or you can leave him as he is. How do they compare? They look very different, don't they? Okay. I need to quickly grab the hairdryer, guys. 1 second. Give him a dry and finish my cold tea. There we go. It's nice and dry. Now I can dust off that salt. Get rid of the salt, reveal the pattern that it's created, and to finish off, just take your fine liner pen. You've never done a bird. Rainy day goals, Demi, exactly. So I'm going to come round his chest. I'm just taking my, this is by Unipin, Derwent, to another good brand. I sell the Derwent brand. You can buy them in sets of 3 or 5 or 6, I think. And this is a 0.2, so quite a fine one. I'm just going to add a few little, I love ink and watercolour. Just add in, this is optional, you don't have to do this. Come in between his beak. But you want your little marks with your ink pen to just be that. Just something to showcase what you've done rather than take over what you've done. Few lines through his towel, and I'll bring a few feather-like marks again over his wing. When I'm doing something like this, people ask me, why don't you ink first? Sometimes I do, but on this I want the ink just to be an accessory to the watercolour rather than the other way round. So the only thing I'd say using the water bottle is that, can you see where the white area is clear on my bird from a few days ago? Here, because I use a spray bottle, it's allowed the watercolour just to seep in, but I quite like it. No problem with that. Okay, I'm going to add a few lines along the edge of my branch. And for good measure, because I didn't do it on the other one, first of all, eraser. Have you got an eraser? Get rid of any pencil marks that are showing around the edge. Get rid of those. There we go. Dust them away. And I'm going to give him a splatter. Now, you could put a background in if you wanted to. I'm just going to put some clean water around the edge, here and there. I'm just going to choose some places so that when I splatter, I get different mixed results. A bit too much. Just dab it. I'm going to use the, let's use the burnt sienna. Now for the splatter, you need your paint nice and runny. Load your brush up. If you want to protect your bird, just put a bit of tissue over him. There you go, he's protected. And have fun, have a little splatter. What's going to happen, where the splatters hit the wet areas that I put on, the paint will spread out, and where it hits the dry paper, it will stay where it is. I'm going to add some grey as well, because those are the main colours we've used today. A few grey splatters around my bird. There we go. A little sparrow. So guys, a reminder, I hope you've enjoyed watching me today. We've come to the end of our hour. A reminder, I'm just going to play a little video at the end, if it works, just showcasing some of the on-demand classes that you can find over on my website. Also, don't forget, if you want to buy any equipment, support small business, head over to my art product page. You'll see brushes, paints, pads there, fine liner ink pens, and whatever you need to do these classes. So I'm just going to hit the button. I'm going to say goodbye to you all now and play the little clip. Don't go until you've watched it. I spent hours on this. Thanks guys for joining me. I'll see you next Wednesday. Take care. Everybody!